Welcome to this video where I'll introduce you to non-destructive editing in Photoshop. So one of the big things with Photoshop is that you don't want to sort of change the original image. You do want to change it, but you don't want to change it so that you can't go back. And so the best way to do that is through something called adjustment layers. And so I'll show you what not to do. The thing not to do is a adjustment like this, say a brightness contrast adjustment, and then just change it in here. So if we wanted to reduce the brightness a little bit, increase the contrast, okay, give a bit more color, and then if you go OK, what happens is that there's no layer here. There's nothing that sort of you can go back and adjust. You've changed this image sort of, especially if you save it, basically forever. Okay, there's no way to go back unless you had that original image. You can't make any more sort of changes to what you've done. So that's not the best way. And if you want to go back, obviously in Photoshop, you can use Control-Alt-Z to go back more than one step. Okay, so Control-Alt-Z. If you go here, Edit, Undo, that goes one step, and then multiple step backwards, Alt-Control-Z or Control-Alt-Z. You can also go to the window here and the history, and I haven't done very much, obviously. Open and brightness and contrast, and you can go back. Okay, so that's our original image. Now, the better way to make that same adjustment is by using an adjustment layer. Now, there's a variety of ways that you can get into the adjustment layer. One of those is up here, Layer, and then down here, New Adjustment Layer, and Brightness and Contrast. And so you'll do this. Don't worry about the clipping mask at the moment. Just go OK. And the big difference is that now you have a separate layer here. You still have the same slider. We saw this before, and it will preview it so you can change the brightness and the contrast, okay, to get what you want. But the key difference is that you actually have a layer here. So in order to, see my adjustment, what changes, I can turn that on and off, right? The visibility. Another thing that you can do is you can play with the opacity, okay? And so I can just sort of see what's going on there as I change the opacity. So that would basically increase or decrease the effect as you play with the opacity. And you can also play with the blending layer. I don't think it will do too much here, but you can play with that if you needed to. The other thing is that you can add more adjustment layers on top. And then as you make your changes, you can sort of analyze which is better or which is worse. Now, just to show you there too, another way of doing it down here, I believe, there's more adjustment layers. Okay, so you can increase the vibrance, for example, and it just stacks on top. And now you've got your vibrance slider here. And so you can play around with that and see what you like. Give it sort of that almost unreal look with too much color in it. And you can sort of play around and see what these do. Okay. So pull away all that, desaturate it, and it basically turns it to a black and white image. But again, you can sort of go back now and say, oh, maybe what happens if I decrease the brightness more or backed up, went more bright on that. So you can still go back and adjust those, whereas the way I showed you originally, you would be unable to do that. And this is a very important principle with Photoshop, is to try to use non-destructive methods of altering the image, because that will give you the flexibility to go back and change things as you require it. All right. So what I'd like you to do, you can play around with this image. I'd like you to find an image, okay, on your own. It might relate to whatever your company is, or just find a nice image, and then play around with some of those adjustments. There's lots there to play with. Okay, see what happens. We'll talk more about some in later videos there, but the cool thing to do is just see what happens. What does a photo filter do? What can you do with the photo filter? And see, they got all these different filters. See what happens. Play with multiple adjustments. Turn those off and see what happens just on their own, and so on. All right, so expect you to explore a little bit, okay, but get used to the idea of layers if you haven't really used Photoshop before. The idea of adding adjustment layers, and then, like I said, play around with them and see what they do. All right, and we'll see you in the next video where we'll look at getting rid of a color cast.